The boat came in slow, middle of the day, quiet stretch of the River Medway. To anyone watching, it looked routine. A lone cruiser pulling up to Cuxton Marina, one man shirtless on deck, a white van waiting at the quay. But just beyond the tree line, they were already in place. Plainclothes officers, covert vans, rifles tucked low, cameras rolling from across the water. They'd watched every call, every crossing, every careless message. And now, after months of silence, it was time to move. No one on the boat knew the full scale of what was about to hit them. Not yet. They were too busy unloading the bags. This is the story of a river drop that was never meant to be seen, and how Britain's biggest ever automatic firearms smuggling operation was dismantled. He wasn't loud, no flashy cars, no violent rep. But Harry Shilling, 25 years old and based in Swanley, Kent, wanted scale. Drugs brought money, but not power, not reach, and not fear. Guns, he believed, could bring all three. That's where the plan began. He wasn't working alone. In his circle was Michael Dufresne, 30, from Bexley Heath, his link to suppliers in Europe. Then Richard Rye, 24, who acted as courier, messenger, and runner between the rest. The three men formed a triangle, one with cash, one with contacts, and one to keep things moving. Their plan? Source cheap, deactivated military weapons from Eastern Europe. Pay to have them reactivated, smuggle them into the UK by boat, then hide them until they could be sold, hired out, or used. The idea wasn't new, but the scale was. Shilling wasn't interested in handguns or bits of kit. He wanted military firepower, the kind that could clear a room, the kind criminals would pay thousands to get their hands on. In encrypted messages, he spoke in code, toys for guns, and sweets for ammo. Phone records showed him bouncing across Europe, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Belgium. Shilling put the money up for the yacht, a 38-foot motorcruiser called the Albanina, but we will talk in the later part of the video. What they didn't know was the NCA was already in motion. Initial intelligence came through international cooperation, NCA working with Europol and French GEH Dutch authorities. It wasn't the messages that raised alarms, it was patterns, travel routes, port movements, and phone traffic metadata. They weren't reading what was said, but they knew something was moving, and they were closing in. They thought they were moving up, becoming a firm, but they were walking straight into Britain's biggest ever gun sting. The firepower didn't come from war zones, it came from the back room of a legal supplier in Slovakia, what we touched early in this video. Shilling's crew sourced the arsenal through a company called AFG, based in a small industrial town called Paryzanske. The business was known for selling acoustic expansion weapons, military-grade firearms that had been deactivated with a single pin drilled through the barrel. This was the same Slovakian supplier used by the Charlie Hebdo attackers. Under Slovak law, they were legal to buy, but to the black market, they were just a few minutes from being deadly again. The gang's order included 22 VZ-58 assault rifles, near replicas of the AK-47, and 9 Scorpion machine pistols, once used by Czech special forces. Small, automatic, designed for rapid fire. Each weapon cost less than £120. Once reactivated, they could be sold in the UK for up to £4,000 apiece. The weapons weren't ornamental. They came with 58 magazines, 1,500 rounds of live ammunition, and 2 silencers. All boxed and ready, all sourced through the same channels used in the Charlie Hebdo terror attacks 6 months earlier. None of the gang had military backgrounds, but they didn't need one. A metal rod and hammer was enough to reverse the deactivation. The rifles were soon back to firing 7.62mm rounds, heavy, fast, and designed to tear through cover. Every part of the order was about efficiency, cheap to buy, easy to move, devastating when used. There was no glamour, no ideology, just weapons as product, stacked and packed for resale. That was the business model. They didn't take a lorry, no hidden compartments in commercial trailers. They used a boat and hoped no one would be watching. The vessel was called the Albinina, a white and blue 38-foot motor cruiser registered clean and moored in France. It had been bought weeks earlier under a false name, funded by Schilling's operation. No suspicious paperwork, no alarm bells. On paper, it was just another pleasure craft moored at Boulogne-sur-Mer. On board was David Payne, 43. No convictions, no known history. Just a seasoned skipper paid to move something across the channel. What he was carrying lay hidden below. 22 rifles, 9 Scorpions, 58 magazines, 1,500 rounds of ammunition, and 2 silencers. All of it sealed in sports holdalls and packed tight under the deck. They left France on the 10th of August, bound for the River Medway. The plan was simple: arrive unnoticed, unload fast, disappear. But they weren't alone on the water. The NCA tracked the vessel across land and sea, watching every knot. They didn't intercept mid-channel. That would have tipped the network. Instead, they let it play out. On the 11th of August, just after midday, the Albinina glided into Cuxton Marina, Kent. Payne moored the boat, stepped off calmly. Minutes later, a white van pulled into the lot. 2 men got out. 1 wore gloves. From a covert camera across the river, the entire handover was captured. Bags passed from boat to van, zipped tight, no conversation. Christopher Owen and Matthew Smale did the lifting. Payne stayed close. Still, the NCA didn't move. They wanted the weapons out in the open, the faces on film, the full chain captured from end to end. By the time the van pulled away, the drop was complete. The guns were in transit, and the trap was set. The van didn't get far. Just outside Cuxton, on a narrow rural track, it was boxed in by armed officers. No warning, no chance to run. Inside were Christopher Owen and Matthew Smale, still wearing gloves, still surrounded by holdalls. Every bag was zipped. The hall was untouched. The firearms were seized on the spot. Elsewhere, the rest of the network started to move. But the NCA was already there. Harry Schilling, Michael Dufresne and Richard Rye had arranged to meet at a home-based car park in Orpington. They hadn't yet received the shipment, but they were preparing for what came next. Inside the store, Schilling and Dufresne bought spades and heavy-duty bags. Tools, the prosecution would later say, were for burying the guns. The plan was clean up, hide the evidence, start distribution later, but they never got that far. At the home-based car park in Orpington, officers moved in. Harry Schilling was visibly shaken. He turned pale, broke into a sweat, and struggled to breathe as he was put under arrest. Michael Dufresne, calm by comparison, was detained moments later. Richard Rye wasn't with them inside. As officers surrounded the area, he slipped away, cutting through the car park and into a nearby McDonald's. CCTV captured him pacing, placing a call, wiping his phone. He was arrested minutes later by a plainclothes officer who entered the restaurant without warning. No fight, no noise. Just another arrest, quietly handled. David Payne, the skipper, was arrested at the scene as the van left Cuxton Marina. By the end of the day, every key player was in custody. The coordination had been precise. Every arrest rolled out within hours of the drop. No time for the group to hide, run, or silence devices. Phones were seized, cars impounded. The guns were now in police hands, and so were the men who tried to smuggle them in. The NCA had built the case in silence and took it down in a single day. The arrest gave them bodies, the van gave them guns, but it was the phones that gave them everything else. Each key member of the network had carried a BlackBerry handset secured with PGP encryption, military-grade protection designed to keep messages unreadable and untraceable. The system had no contact names. Messages could be deleted remotely. Devices wiped clean in seconds. But the NCA didn't rush. They secured the handsets and shipped them to a specialist unit in Canada. one of the only teams in the world capable of breaking into them. It took months, but it worked. Inside were chat logs, dates, and code words. Conversations between Schilling, Dufresne, and others included talk of Glocks, clips, prices, quantities, plans for repeat shipments, talk of 30 pieces next time. One message read, "Armed to the teeth. No one wants beef, fam." The messages also tied them to the boat. Payment discussions, updates about the crossing, the planning of the collection. In one chat, Schilling sent a message to Dufresne after the weapons had landed read as, "We now officially gangsters." Another outlined instructions on how to meet at Cuxton and where to dig once the drop was complete. Phones from Rye, Smale, and Owen placed them at key locations. GPS data matched surveillance footage down to the minute. Even messages from unnamed contacts painted a broader picture of intent, not just one run, but a plan to scale the operation. The encrypted phones didn't just support the case, they built it. Every message became a thread. And when pulled together, they formed the backbone of a case the defense couldn't explain away. There was no guesswork left. Just data, timestamps, and admissions typed by the men themselves. Security was tight. The men were brought in separately, under escort. Armed officers stationed at entrances, jurors screened. The weight of the case wasn't just in the evidence. It was in what could have happened if it had gone undetected. Prosecutors laid it out plainly. This was the largest automatic weapons seizure in UK criminal history. Not antiques, fully functioning war-grade firearms, ready to fire, loaded and destined for the streets. The courtroom saw the footage, grainy, silent clips of men unloading bags at Cuxton Marina. Gloved hands, quick lifts, nothing flashy. Then the arrest tapes, the recovered weapons. The holdalls lined with check-made rifles and scorpions. One by one, the phones were presented. Schilling's encrypted messages, Dufresne's code, Rye's GPS pings, call patterns before and after the crossing. The prosecution walked the jury through it piece by piece. It wasn't just one smuggling job, they argued. It was the first of many. The defendants offered explanations. Payne said he didn't know what was in the van. Smale claimed he thought it was cannabis. Owen didn't speak much at all, but the weight of the surveillance, digital, physical, and forensic, left little room for doubt. Jurors were told this wasn't a theoretical risk. The VZ-58 rifles were capable of firing 800 rounds per minute. The Scorpions came with folding stocks and extended magazines. One gun had already been found loaded in the van at the time of arrest. The judge called it a potential for carnage the UK hadn't seen in decades. By the end of the trial, there was no ambiguity left. The case didn't hinge on motive. It rested on movement, money, and maths. The verdicts came in fast. And the sentences would be just as heavy. When it came, it was decisive. The final warning came from the judge. This wasn't just about guns. It was about what they were built for. If they'd reached the streets, the consequences would have been catastrophic. Harry Schilling, 25, received the longest sentence, 35 years. The court described him as the driving force, the one who paid and sourced the weapons. It was his ambition, they said, that turned a one-off import into the start of something scalable. Michael Dufresne, 30, was sentenced to 27 years. The jury accepted he was Schilling's closest contact in Europe, the one who brokered the deal, secured the suppliers, and kept the logistics moving. Without him, the court heard, there would have been no guns to move. David Payne, the skipper, received 19.5 years. He admitted his role in the crossing and was present during the handover. Richard Rye, 24, who tried to run but was caught at the McDonald's, was jailed for 23 years. His phone placed him at every key location. His messages confirmed he knew what was coming in and how dangerous it was. Christopher Owen, 30, who helped carry the bags from the boat to the van, was handed 15 years. Ammunition was found on him when he was searched. Matthew Smale, who arrived at the marina with Owen, received 14 years. less involved in planning but present at the drop. In total, the group received 133 years in prison. This wasn't a one-off job. It was the start of something bigger, and it had been stopped just in time. What do you make of the sentences? Too heavy? Too light? Or exactly what was needed to shut it down? Let us know below, and if you want more real UK crime stories like this, subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay close. There's always another case to uncover.